Yeah, I mean, look, a couple things I don't really concern myself with. I don't really like. I think some people have a preconception of what a starter is, and they'll say like, "Oh, well, D'Anthony's not a starter," or blah blah blah. I don't worry about that almost at all. In part because if healthy, both these guys are playing 25, 30, maybe some
Yeah.
nights 35, depending on the matchup and how they're going. They're both going to get their time. I don't really care about a classification of, well, this guy's a starter because of this or not a starter because of this. I think that's over discussed. What I do care a lot about is how well lineups work together and how well skill sets mesh with each other. And, two things that I think are important to that. One is shooting and gravity. The other is defensive versatility. I think when they first made the acquisition of Buddy, I said, look, because Buddy's he's been on and off the bench. He's been a starter, I think, probably about 60% of his games. Some situations he should be a starter, some he shouldn't. I think Melton's a little bit like that. Maybe you'd flip it, say 40% of games he should start, 60 he should not. But both have to be in the right spot to be a starter. And I think my initial instinct was, look, the starting lineup with Melton in there was doing so well. Plus 33 in like 500 possessions is an insane number. One I expect to come down, but one, there's a large enough sample there that you trust that to some degree. If it's not broke, don't necessarily change it, especially because I think there are real defensive concerns with Tyrese and Buddy starting alongside of each other. That being said, I do value gravity a lot. I think Buddy has, especially when Embiid comes back, as much gravity as almost anyone in the league would have in this lineup. So that is one thing. Even if I say one of my priorities is defensive versatility and Buddy doesn't offer that, one of my other priorities is gravity. So there's always been a little bit of a push-pull. And like I said, I think my initial instinct was keep Melton in the starting lineup, bring Buddy in as a sixth man. They'll both play 30 minutes. Who really cares? You can close with whichever one has the right matchup or is playing well. That being said, I think Buddy's defense has been better than I expected. So if that is true, everyone acknowledged right from the jump that Buddy is a better offensive player and offensive fit than D'Anthony. If the gap defensively isn't as big as I previously thought, and I think I've always been like, I think D'Anthony's a good, useful defender, but not perfect. And if that gap between those two isn't as big as I thought, then yeah, I would certainly start looking towards starting Buddy. I would like to get a little more information. I actually looked up, if you had to guess the offensive rating in 117 possessions with Maxey and Buddy next to each other, or defensive rating, I'm sorry. It was a lot worse than I thought. They give up 128.4 points per 100 so far. It's 3 games. It doesn't matter. But it is something to keep an eye on. Do they have the versatility? Because the eye test for me said, no, Buddy's actually competing pretty well. He's holding up better than I expected. He's certainly giving better effort than I expected. The question is, does that translate when you start playing against Boston and that ilk? And truth be told, D'Anthony would struggle a little bit there because he just doesn't have the size. He doesn't get through screens good enough. Like I said, he's not a perfect defender, and I think a lot of times we oversimplify it by saying he's a good one. He is exploitable to some degree. I guess this is a long way of me saying my initial inclination was to keep D'Anthony in there because it was working and because he offered a little more defensive versatility. After 3 games, I've shifted a little bit towards my inclination being start Buddy, bring D'Anthony off the bench. But really, if I take a step back, I'm saying I can't believe we're even having this discussion because nobody's freaking healthy on this team, and I have no confidence anyone ever will be. I have to see D'Anthony walk before I pencil him into any kind of a role, but it is a good problem to have.
We all silly like the mayor.